Hello everybody, it's Sarah, and I took longer to go and film this video than I thought I would. So let's just jump right into it and talk about my best books of 2024, which, by the way, actually it's kind of good that I waited so long to film this video because I read a sequel to a book that I read last year and I was like, you know what, actually, now that I think back on that first book, it does deserve a 5 star. So it would have been in this video probably anyway, but you know, now it's in here as a 5 star. So now I don't have 6 5 stars for 2024. I have 7 5 stars for 2024, I think. Anyway, this video is going to be basically like 3 parts because some of the 5 stars that I want to talk about are rereads. And specifically rereads that I didn't give 5 stars the first time, but definitely did now on reread. And then I also have some books that I didn't give 5 stars that I have still become obsessed with, but I still don't feel the need to, you know, change my rating of it because there were enough things where I'm like, it wasn't quite a 5 star for me. However, I have made this my personality for like a good month at least this year. And so let's start with the rereads. And the first of the rereads that I think I gave 4.25 stars the first time around, or 4.5 stars, and now 5 stars on the second time around, was Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Ames. This is the first book in the Band series, which is going to be a series of like companion novels, as in all the stories are contained within each other. However, you have some characters moving from one book to the other, and you know, it's also kind of set chronologically, so there's stuff that happens in this book that provides context for stuff that happens in the second book, whatever. This is D&D meets 80s glam rock, and I loved it the first time around already. However, I wanted to definitely reread this because the first time that I read it, I hadn't started playing D&D yet or looking into D&D. And so now with like having some experience DMing, I really wanted to reread this. This first book follows a band of mercenaries. It's generally set in this world where bands of mercenaries are kind of like superstars and rock stars. Like a few decades ago, the bands still went out into the Heartwild, it's called, like where all the monsters are, and would kill monsters and would become big through that. But nowadays the monsters are brought to the bands into arenas, and there's like cheering and people and fans and whatever. However, we follow not one of the new types of bands, we follow one of the old school ones, and one that has actually for a few years now already been retired. However, the former leader of the band comes to our main character, something with C, Clay, that's what it was, comes to Clay and begging him for help bringing the old band together because his daughter is in a currently besieged city, besieged by a huge army of monsters, and so he wants to bring the band back together to save her. This is fun and humorous. It does so many amazing things with like tropes and fantasy storytelling and subverting it, as well as D&D tropes and subverting those. However, it also has this really amazing emotional core that just brings everything perfectly together. And so yeah, on the first read I already enjoyed it, but I don't think I got the full scope of it and the full genius of it, so I do think you probably get more out of the book if you also play D&D. But yeah, since I do that now, I definitely had to give it 5 stars on my second read. And then my other reread that I had given, I think also 4.5 stars on the first read and now 5 stars on the second read, was The Queens of Inishlia by Tessa Gretton. This is a Shakespeare retelling, but set in a high fantasy world, so a secondary world. And it's a retelling, as you can probably tell from the title, since Lear is in the title, of King Lear. For those who don't know, the general plot of King Lear is you have this old king, King Lear, who has to choose a successor, and he has 3 daughters, and he tells those 3 daughters, the daughter who can convince me that she loves me most I will give her my kingdom. And of the 3 daughters, the youngest refuses to take part in this game, and for that is exiled. Now in this story we don't follow King Lear, we follow the 3 daughters, that's why it's Queens of Inishleia, and we in fact do follow all 3 of them. So you kind of have our main character, I guess, the youngest daughter, who is sent into exile and kind of how she deals with that, and you have the 2 older daughters who stand by each other. And the thing I love about this book is that in its core it's less about what is happening, but it's more so a character exploration. It's very much as I have experience a lot of Shakespeare plays to be, where it really is less about the plot and it's more about the characters. And the tragedy is that those specific characters with their characteristics, with their personalities, just don't fit what is happening. And if they were any, like, the tragedy is that if they were any different, the tragedy probably could have been averted. And it's very similar in here. Like, this very much is in the vein of a Shakespeare drama. This also is gorgeously written. I loved Hester Gretton's writing, and I am so excited for her new adult book that comes out this year. Like, I cannot wait. But yeah, absolutely love this, absolutely adore this. Also, it's really funny how in the course of time, as you learn more about different people and different things, your perspectives really change, because I had already put this on my queer recommendations list like way back when, but I put it on there mainly because I know the author is genderqueer, and I was like, there's no obviously queer characters in this book. However, on a reread, one of the 3 sisters is so obviously queer. I say sister because she's always called sister. However, she's very obviously some type of genderqueer, probably a trans man. She feels like so uncomfortable in her body. It's like, however, it doesn't, like, it's never clearly said because that wouldn't fit the story. And so yeah, it just is something interesting, just as you become more educated about the world around you, how you notice different things on new reads. And that's also why I love rereading books. Next, we're gonna continue on to my not quite 5 stars books. However, I did become obsessed with these books in the course of the year. And the first I want to talk about is The Beautiful Ones by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This one is a standalone, and it's the second Silvia Moreno Garcia book that I really enjoyed out of the 5 that I read by her. And it really made me almost reconsider just like not giving this author more chances, because 3 of the books I just really didn't care for. But anyway, The Beautiful Ones is set in this kind of Victorian type society, French society. It's like courtly society. It's not very strict, maybe Regency, whatever. It's like not very set in the time period. You just need to know it's this kind of very courtly society with debutantes, etc. And you follow 2 characters. One of them is, I think, called not Victor, Hector, and the other one is Nina. Nina is a debutante, however she's also quite unruly, which is not seemly for a woman, which kind of annoys her cousin's wife a lot, who is a very proper lady. The other character we follow is Hector, who is a magician entertainer who through different contexts also gets into high society, especially also because he's quite a famous entertainer, and he gets close to Nina for different reasons, but also because she has magical talent. However, he has some secondary motivations that he's hiding, and that is that Nina's cousin's wife was his first love, and he wants to try to win her back. And so it's once again very much relationship and character exploration, more so relationship exploration rather than character exploration. I'm not gonna tell you if it's a romance or not, because I think sometimes the fun in books is in not knowing if the two characters that you want to get together. However, in its tropes, it's very much going along the lines of romantic fantasy or romantasy. So yeah, I loved the characters. I loved how complicated they were. If you're not a fan of age gaps, I wouldn't recommend it, because I do think that, like, Nina at the beginning of the story is 19 and Hector is 27 or something. And it's mostly about the relationship between those two, so if that's not something that you like, then I would keep away from this book. But otherwise, absolutely gorgeous, amazing, beautiful. Also, something I forgot to mention, of course, because I do have one for this one, I think. Of course, if I have any reviews for books I mentioned, I will leave them linked down below. Something that, funnily enough, all my not quite 5-star books have in common is that they're somewhat in the direction of romantic fantasy, which, generally speaking, I'm not mostly a fan of the genre. However, if they hit, they just really hit for me. And so this next book I had an ARC for, and I loved it, and so I had to get it, like, a physical copy to, you know, continue supporting the author, and also because I might want to reread this at some point. But the book I'm talking about is Coal Gets in Your Veins by Kat Rector. This is paranormal romantasy set in this small former coal mining town in Nova Scotia, and it's one of those towns that were, like, had their heyday during the coal mining times. And I mean, heyday was still, you know, it was mostly workers living there who were very, very much what's it called, taken advantage of by the big coal mining people, owners. However, since coal mining stopped, people have just moved away a lot, and so you only have the bare bones of the society still left, and it's basically, it's a dying town. And you follow two characters. The first character is Laurel. Laurel is a woman who currently lives in an abusive marriage. However, she's not quite ready to admit herself that that is what her marriage is, because then she would have to admit that she should probably leave it, and that would mean having to leave her whole life behind. And the second character we follow is Spencer, who is a, like, 300-year-old vampire, and his lovers died a few decades before, and since then he has been in pain, and he wants to stay in pain. And so he moves to this little town called, I think it's something, Penny Harbor. Yeah, Penny Harbor. Because he can't drink the blood of people there because they all taste disgusting because of all the coal in the air. And he just kind of is a masochistic little fuck who thinks he doesn't deserve any joy. And so, well, he's depressed mostly. And so the two of them meet, and through meeting and through the relationship, the two of them start healing. And then there's also some secondary plot going on that I will not mention too much, because that is kind of going into spoiler territory. I absolutely adored this book. I adored Spencer and Laurel. I adored the relationship. I adored how the author switched up and changed like vampire tropes, how the author leaned into them in some ways, but then also maybe not so much in others. I will say though, Spencer by the author is described as like a mashup of Spike and Astarion, which maybe is true like physically and the way he dresses a little bit. However, not at all vibes-wise, because Spencer, while he doesn't care about killing people, Spencer is a fucking golden retriever. I love him. There's not a single bit of bad boy in him, so yeah, I adore him. And I adored this book. I can highly recommend it. Also, it is queer. Yes, we have a heterosexual romance. However, Spencer is very, very proudly and out a bisexual man. And Laurel, through meeting Spencer, also for the first time, allows herself to maybe think whether or not she might be bisexual and might find women attractive as well, which is something, growing up in a small town, she never really allowed herself to consider about herself. So yeah, that's on that, and I need to switch out my battery right now. So battery's back in, so now let's continue on to my last, not quite 5-star. This is a duology that I have talked about a lot also this year, and one thing I always mention with this duology, so let's see if you can guess which one I'm talking about, is that while each of the books wasn't quite a 5-star for me, the duology as a whole definitely is, and that is the Shepherd King duology by Rachel Gillig with One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns. This duology is a romantic fantasy duology. It's set in this world where you get magical powers from these, what's it called? Providence cards. And also within this kingdom there's this mist that keeps encroaching on like the people living there, and if you go out into the mist you basically lose yourself. And these Providence cards, there's 13 different ones of them, and there's a different number of each one of those. And the king is looking for them all. Our main character is Elspeth, and Elspeth has a secret. She can use magic, which is forbidden on the penalty of death, aside from Providence cards. And she also has this thing inside her, which she mostly, I think, if I remember correctly, calls her monster. And so she goes out and goes to this ball for the honor of someone. I don't remember. She meets the captain of the King's Guard there. The two of them kind of maybe hit it off, or do they? However, something that does happen is that the King's Guard and Elspeth, for reasons that I forgot right now, to be honest, I think maybe he finds out that she can use magic. Does he? I think that might have been it. The two of them band together to find the Providence cards before the king does, because the king is a tyrant. That was a very confusing explanation that probably doesn't make the series appealing at all. However, it's not necessarily the plot why I love this series so much. It's the narrative structure, which I can't go in depth about because that would kind of be spoilers for book 2. I will say though, you follow a different main couple in book 2. However, I would still say that Elspeth is kind of the main character still. It's complicated, okay? However, I adored both of these books. I really enjoyed the writing. As I said, I really loved the narrative structure. I loved our couple in book 2. I loved, like, Elm, I think his name was. The couple in the first book, like Elspeth, her love interest, the captain of the guard, is kind of a little bit boring. However, I really, really enjoyed Elspeth as a main character. And so, yeah, as a whole, because this duology is so masterfully made, definitely 5 out of 5 duology. Each book, I think I gave one 4.5 stars and the other one, the second one, 4.75 stars. But yeah, highly recommended, highly enjoyed it. So next we will go through my 5-star reads of 2024, and we'll start with the only one where I'm gonna say it's more of an honorable mention. I gave this 5 stars because it was perfect for what it was. However, it's not necessarily a book, like this specific book won't stay with me, and that is Tales of the Celestial Kingdom by Sue Lynn Tan. Won't tell you too much about it. Loved the first book. I think I gave it 4 stars. I gave the second book also 5 stars, which was Heart of the Sun Warrior, and this is just a short story collection set previously, during, and after the duology. And yeah, it was just exactly what I wanted from this short story collection. So I was like, I don't see a reason not to give it 5 stars. However, since it's a short story collection, it's not like it's ooh, amazing. Also, I won't give you a synopsis of the Celestial Kingdom duology. It's kind of loosely inspired by the myth of the moon goddess, or a Chinese myth of the moon goddess. And it follows her daughter who wants to free her, roughly. So yeah, but I enjoyed it. Was my first read of 2024 and I gave it 5 stars, so perfect. Next, I'm not gonna put this in any particular order, or these books in any particular order, because to be honest, that's even harder than it usually is for me. Also because I read them over the whole year, so some of them might have recency bias, etc. So I'll just kind of go through the books, which, very interesting. I just realized that like 5 out of my 5-star reads this year, out of the 7 5-star reads that I had this year, are by Asian authors. Mostly like, or authors of Asian heritage. Mostly Eastern Asian heritage, except for this one, which is Minor Detail by Adania Shibli, who is a Palestinian author. And this was like, this is my only non-fantasy book on this list. It's translated from Arabic by Elizabeth Jaquette, and this is a story told in 2 parts. The first part is told during the Nakba, or just after the Nakba, through the point of view of an Israeli soldier, captain, whatever. He was like some type of rank, who with his troops finds a Palestinian girl, takes her to camp, and also rapes her. And the second story that we follow is then decades later, about this woman living in the West Bank who comes across this detail of this girl, and this minor detail in history, that's where the title comes from, and becomes absolutely obsessed with her and wants to try and find out what exactly her story was. This was, first of all, obviously completely heartbreaking. It's not an easy book to read, but it's incredibly well written. It is written in this way where the author uses these combinations of words as like images, but also as like signifiers for stuff happening. Like one of the images is the soldier has like pours oil over the Palestinian girl, and then always smells the oil on his hands, and the smell of the oil then continues on into the story of the woman in the West Bank. The same thing also happens, for example, with a dog barking. Like, there's these phrases that signify specific things happening, and it's just so well done. I can like highly recommend it. Obviously, just for, you know, not context, but diversifying your reading and adding perspectives to what you read. That's like part of the reason, but I would say that it's just generally a goal. But also just from a writing perspective, I can highly recommend this book. So yeah, that's on that. Now on to more happy books. Looking at this, not really, to be honest. I don't think there's a single book in these that's like a fully happy ending, so let's continue on. Next, let's talk about Speaking Bones by Ken Liu. This is the last book in the Dandelion Dynasty, which I finished at the start of 2024. It's a chonker. It's over 1,000 pages. I finally finished it, And I remember years ago, after reading the Dandelion Dynasty, saying that there's gonna be at least one book in the series that I will give 5 stars, and this was finally it. The Dandelion Dynasty is kind of hard to explain because it's a multi-generational story, but it starts with this Imperium, and it starts with a rebellion, and it starts with 2 men who fight in this rebellion, who are very different, who fight on the same side, and then through the course of history start fighting on different sides. And it's kind of starts with those 2 men, but like history goes on, and then there's a lot of philosophy in there and bureaucracy and a lot of different elements that get added into the story. And within this book we have the culmination of all of the elements. There were a lot of like things in this book where I was like, okay, Ken Liu could kind of like really ruin this and like not add the nuance it needs. However, overall, I think he did really well. I think that they're like, it's almost in some parts a bit too perfect of an ending, but that kind of has to do with the troubles of high fantasy. It's kind of very similar to, where is it, to the Mask of Mirrors Rook and Rose trilogy, which also almost ends a little bit too perfectly, because, you know, where stories need an end, history doesn't have an end. So if you have very complex political fantasies, a lot of times the endings will feel too perfect. I don't mind that, however, like, at least not in this specific case. So yeah, I can definitely recommend the series. It's 4 books in total, especially if you like highly political, very slow moving fantasy. Next, I have my 1 YA on this list, which I read in December, I think, or did I finish it in November? Somewhere around there. I think I read it in December because I don't remember talking about it in a wrap-up. The book, which I kind of got on a whim because the quotes that I saw on social media kind of, you know, caught my eye, is Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews. This is horror, romantic horror possibly. There is a central romance to this, however, since it is horror, I don't want to say if it's horror romance or not, because obviously romance has a happily ever after, and I don't want to spoil if this book does or not. But this story follows Andrew and Thomas, who have been inseparable since they started attending the same school, together with Andrew's twin sister. However, a new year started, something happened last year, which we're not exactly sure what that was, what that is. And now Thomas won't speak to Andrew, and his sister also won't speak to him. And at the same time, there's monsters appearing on the school grounds and in the forest around the school grounds. Monsters that are eerily similar to drawings that Thomas makes, and so the 2 of them kind of have to reconcile their differences to possibly defend against these monsters. So I'm just gonna read you, like, from pretty much the very beginning, a few sentences. "Tell me a secret," Thomas said, "and I'll tell you one. I'm glad Dove didn't come with us tonight," Andrew swallowed, his skin suddenly hot. "I'm scared of everything except the dark." Thomas huffed the tiniest laugh. "I knew that. You write the darkest things and it never keeps you up. Tell me yours." "I think someday you'll hate me." Thomas's voice stretched with a loneliness Andrew had never heard before. "You'll cut me open and find a garden of rot where my heart should be." Andrew let the silence sharpen between them, waited until Thomas' breath caught in quiet anguish from being made to wait. "When I cut you open," Andrew finally said, "all I'll find is that we match." It's so good. It is so good. Like, I've already I've been screaming about this book pretty much to everyone. It's YA, it's dark, it's like if you don't like body horror, I wouldn't pick this up. For me, body horror very much depends, but this is the type of body horror I like. Like, it's not slime and gore body horror, it's woods and beetles body horror. So good. Just everyone go read this. Even if you don't love YA that much anymore, as I don't, go ahead and read it. The writing is so good. 3 books left. Next book I have is Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wang, which is her new book that came out in 2023, originally self-published, and last year was published, traditionally published by Orbit, I think. And this one is... it's dark academia, it's high fantasy, and you follow 2 different characters, although one of those 2 different characters is our main POV character, the other one is mostly just our framing character for the beginning and for the end of the story. So the main character that we follow is Skiona, and Skiona is the first female high mage. She has made it where no one else in academia has made it before. She has gone there, she has made it through the exams to being a high mage. And so now she thinks that she has gone past all obstacles. However, when she is like directed towards where she's going to be researching stuff, she realizes that no, actually, the obstacles aren't over. And the reason why is because her colleagues, her male colleagues, wanna taunt her. They tell her that she is going to take the janitor as her research partner, which she does. The janitor is someone who is part of a people called the Quen, who are basically migrants into the city where everything is set, which is the only safe space on this huge, like, plain where Tamil's people, so the person who's now the research assistant, used to live as nomads. However, now for a few decades, maybe even centuries, something has become more and more common, which is called the Blight, which has slowly killed his people, and the only way they can survive is now going into the city, living there as refugees, and being terribly treated. And so Tamil is a refugee, and he now has to help Skiona. And the story is about Skiona and Tamil working together, Skiona learning a lot through interacting with Tamil, but also being frustratingly set in her ways. And it's very well done in a way where it's like you have this main character who, yes, did have to fight a lot to get where she is. However, in other ways is still very privileged because she grew up working class also, but she would never have been treated as lowly as the Quen. And so you have this just like very, very interesting dynamic between the 2 people. Skiona is an incredibly infuriating character to follow because she is not above prejudice and racism simply because she's the main character, so she's not allowed to have that. No, we follow her as she works through these things and maybe even doesn't fully work through these things. It's kind of very hard to explain, but I really enjoyed following her. I would describe this book as Babel if Lottie was the main character and Lottie had the ability to learn and to change. Which obviously Lottie in Babel doesn't, but just as a rough descriptor. Skiona is very much a morally grey main character who you can empathize with a lot because obviously she has gone through a lot as a woman, but she's also very, very set in her ways in a lot of different ways. Sorry. It's hard to describe this book. I don't know why. But I can highly recommend it. I loved it. I once again sobbed by the end. I don't know why I was surprised that the book ripped out my heart and then stepped on it and tore it into little pieces. I love Emma Wang's writing. This book is amazing. Sword of Kaigen is still like slightly above it, although I need to reread Sword of Kaigen, to be honest. But yeah, I will probably reread or maybe reread this year, because if you've been following me and Steph and Scylla like on our journey throughout reading or rereading the Stormlight Archive and now reading Wind and Truth, we have played with the idea of keeping this book club going and reading books critically and talking about them. And I think Blood over Brighthaven was on the table for possibly reading it this year all together, and then also making a live show on it, because we need books where we can actually prove that we enjoy books also. So yeah, but highly recommend. Can just like everyone go read this. Next one, because this is going to be a short one as well, because I never know how to talk about Nevo's books. The City in Glass, which was the novel by her that came out this year. I think she also, maybe at the beginning of the year there was also a Singing Hills novella, but yeah. The City in Glass is once again also very complicated to sum up. Basically, we follow Vitrine, who is a demon, and she has the city that she has built over the last 3 centuries. And one day angels come and destroy the city. And in her anger, she spits at one of the angels, and a part of her lodges herself into the angel. And then she grieves for a few centuries. And the angel is exiled out from wherever the angels are and returns to Vitrine in hopes that... we don't actually know what he hopes. He also doesn't know what he hopes. And it follows the two of them as they rebuild the city that the angel destroyed and took from Vitrine. And what can I say? It's Nevo. These types of novellas, like this is the first, not novellas, novels. This is the first of the novels that's like not a retelling or not set in our world. But these books, more so than the Singing Hills novellas, is where Nevo's writing shines. Nevo is one of my favorite writers ever, if not just my favorite writer generally. She writes in a way that is so like, it's like painting an image. It's like painting with words. It's dripping with symbolism and metaphors, and you're never quite certain if what she's writing is meant literally or symbolically, and it's so gorgeous. It's so gorgeous, and I don't know what else to say except, once again, go read it. I love the ending of this as well. It's so good. And then the last book I want to talk about is the book where I switched it from a 4-point-something rating to a 5-star rating recently, and that is Angels Before Man by Rafael Nicolas. I just finished Angels and Man, which is my second 5-star read so far in 2025, which is crazy. Like 6 5-star reads in total last year, already 2 in January this year. Like, who am I? Anyway, Angels Before Man is, or the Angels trilogy, is a queer retelling, or the books are queer retellings of different parts of the Bible. And this first one is Angels Before Man, so it's from the creation of Lucifer to the fall of Lucifer, is the contents of this book. And you follow Lucifer as he kind of tries to figure out what type of angel he is, who he can be, what his relationship is to God, what his relationship is to other angels, especially the Archangel Michael. And it's queer, and it's yearning, and it's beautifully written, and it's just, once again, this one is like really very cleansing in a way, because like God is terrifying in this one, and it just, it's complicated, and you feel with Lucifer and for Lucifer, and it doesn't at the same time shy away from the one big thing that is always said to be his problem, which is his pride. And it's about the creation of sin, and there's so much here thematically about how queerness is seen and how it's seen as problematic and sinful. And it's just, if you're a queer person with religious trauma, I think you would really love this. Also, if you're a queer person, you would really love this. And probably if you're a non-queer person who has religious trauma, I think everyone can love this, unless you don't like very purple prose and flowery writing, because this is very, very purple prosy. I love it, but be aware. Or if you're easily offended by takes on religion, then I also don't think this is for you. But for everyone else, please, please go and read this. It's so gorgeous, it's so amazing, and yeah. Just in general, not gonna lie, looking at this collection, I am quite happy with the different types of books that I read. Also, I had 3 self-pub books this year, because yes, I do count Blood Over Brighthaven still as self-pub on my list. And yeah, not a lot of series this year, funnily enough. Actually, just one. But yes, with all of that said, this video has been long enough. Tell me in the comments down below, have you read any of the books that I have shared here, and what are your thoughts on them? Did you love them as much as I did? What were your, let's say, top 3 favorite books of 2024? If you enjoyed this video, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up. As in my last video already mentioned, or the video before that, subscribing. Only if you want to be updated when I next upload in about half a year, probably in the summer sometime. But if you want to keep up with me and what I'm reading, join the Discord of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, where we read one adult fantasy book written by a woman or genderqueer person per month. For February, we read Death of the Author by, I think it was Nnedi Okorafor. Then also some of us are currently or got started on The Wars of Shadow and Light by Jenny Wirtz. So if those 2 things sound interesting to you, join us there. And you can, if you just want to follow me and what I'm reading, you can also follow me on Storygraph. And I am currently sometimes making TikTok videos more often than I used to. And yeah, with all of that said, all the links are down below, so go and check them out, and I hope I'll see you very soon. Bye!